I'm going to turn it over to Christy to tell a story about the DYERS and about Microsoft. And so.
Hello, my name is Christy Snyder, and I'm a cultural anthropologist. And I have to say, as I'm standing here, it's a little bit overwhelming to think that I have a job where I just get to listen to people's stories. It's very cool. And so thank you to everybody who's here and everybody who isn't here who shared their stories. And you'll meet some of these people as the night goes on. And I'm going to tell one story, and I will say that there are some family members here, and you can look around and perhaps see a family resemblance to this gentleman here. This is C.M. Dyer. And on the other side of this, am I going to cause interference, Mike, if I walk around this other mic? Thank you. On the other side of this horse, C.M. doesn't have a left leg. When he was 9 years old, he fell out of a tree and had his leg amputated by a doctor on the kitchen table. Yeah, that's a real punch part of the story. But that didn't stop him. He grew up to be an entrepreneur. He owned a series of restaurants up Central Avenue. I'm going to forget the names of them, but the Triangle Restaurant, and that was on the corner of Monte Vista and Central. And in the early 1930s, he bought a piece of land, which is just over there, just this side of the state fairgrounds. This whole sort of square area that seems like it would be part of the state fairgrounds but isn't, that was the piece of land that C.M. Dyer bought. And he started out with horse and livestock business. He started the New Mexico Livestock Exchange. That building is still standing over there. You can see it over there if you go over there. He had saddle horse stables, and so he took people on rides. They would go up to Supper Rock, which is now eclipsed by houses, but is still there. Here's the inside of the auction building. And a little bit later, a few years passed, and he decided that he, like some of the other people we'll talk about during this evening, understood that the development of Albuquerque was coming east. Albuquerque's future lie toward the mountains. And so he decided to start adding businesses, creating a little business district for these growing suburbs that were coming east. Also, Route 66 obviously came through, but he was actually there before Route 66. But Route 66 came through a few years later. The state fairgrounds came through. And so business and residents were starting to move this way. So he built a business district. There was lawyer's office, hair salon stuff, post office. Am I saying the right thing, Dorothy? Hardware store. Yeah, a post office. Was his brother the postmaster? Yeah. So a lot of businesses to support the growing city. And eventually, in the 1950s, he and a partner decided to build a building. It's called the Cal Lynn Building, and it's still there. And it's called the Cal Lynn Building because it's on the corner of California and Lynn. They decided to build a building that was research and development pods for scientists at the labs and also at Kirtland Air Force Base. And several years later, a guy named Ed Roberts moved into one of those spaces. He was a retired, what? Does anybody know? Yeah, he was at Kirtland. He was in the weapons lab. He was retired from, thank you very much. He was retired from the Kirtland weapons lab. And he had an entrepreneurial business on the side called MITS, which was Micro Instrumentation Technology Systems. And so they built little tiny instrumentation systems for model rockets. And that was great, except that only about 100 people bought them. And so then they started making calculators, which was also fantastic. They were selling those like crazy. But then Texas Instruments figured out how to make them really fast and much more affordable. And overnight, Ed Roberts' business went down. So he had to think very quickly, and he had always had a dream of figuring out how to create a portable, stable computer that people could put together. He liked people to be able to put things together through kits. And he wanted to create a home computer that people could actually bring into their homes that would be stable enough, portable enough that they could do that and figure out how to put it together themselves. So this is what he created, the Altair 8800. It was the first time that this had been done. So that's a one-time in the world event, and it happened right here. In fact, they stayed in the Sundowner for a while when they came out originally. No, not they, not Ed Roberts. I haven't gotten to that part of the story yet, sorry. So Altair 8800, Popular Electronics, the magazine, supported the creation of the Altair 8800. They put it on the front of their magazine in January 1975. And this guy read it. His name is Paul Allen. He quit college to work at Honeywell in Boston, and this was his best friend, Bill Gates. And he was also at Harvard. So he read this magazine and he said to him, do you think we could create software for this hardware? And he said, yeah, of course we can. So they called and said, we have software for your hardware. And Ed Roberts said, come on out to Albuquerque. And so they did. And so the beginning of Microsoft. They started in an adjacent space well, MITS was in one space in the Cowlin building, and they started in the space next door. And eventually they moved to 819 Two Park Central Tower, which is the building on the corner of Central and San Mateo, so also in the International District. So this is one story that we found. We're trying to piece together some foundational stories in this exhibit. There are lots and lots and lots of contemporary stories, current stories, stories from the middle period, but what we're trying to do to go along with this foundation of the land is to create some foundational stories of the people as well. So this is one very early story of C.M. Dyer and what he provided and how that, you know, what this was, then provided the space for this. So that's one foundational story that we found here. This is another story here. This story we're not really telling out loud, but this, you know, this story, the first Albuquerque airport, this was homestead land. Two guys from the railroad, Frank Speakman was one of them, homesteaded land, and they turned it into the first Albuquerque airport. It eventually became a private enterprise because the commercial pilots were afraid of landing so close to the mountains. But then that gave way to this super groovy stuff like the Bendix Trophy Race and a lot of stunt flying and stuff in the area. So that happened on homesteading, you know, homesteaded land. So.